Last Tuesday, my wife plopped down across from me with a notebook, a pen, and a look on her face like she was about to pitch a business plan to a room full of suits. What she said next turned our marriage upside down, though not how she thought it would. "We've got to rethink the terms of our marriage," she declared, flipping open her notebook like she was running a corporate meeting. I nearly chuckled, figuring she was pulling my leg. But the stone-cold seriousness in her eyes told me this was no joke. For 8 years, I thought we'd built something rock-solid together. We split chores, cheered each other on, and sorted out disagreements like grown-ups. Sure, we had our flaws, but I figured we were doing all right. Or so I thought. Lately, she'd been glued to videos about relationship empowerment and upgrading your marriage, spending hours in online forums where women talked about raising the bar with their husbands. She started getting pickier, more demanding, but I chalked it up to a passing phase. Man, was I off the mark. "I've been doing my homework," she went on, thumbing through pages of notes she'd scribbled down. "I've realized I've been selling myself short in this marriage. It's time to renegotiate our deal because I've grown, and I deserve better terms." Her tone gave me chills. A marriage isn't some contract you just tweak when you want a sweeter deal. But she was acting like it was exactly that. "So, what kind of terms are we looking at?" I asked, keeping my voice calm even though my brain was sounding every alarm it had. She grinned, clearly thrilled I was playing ball with her boardroom shtick. "I'm glad you're being sensible. I've put together a detailed list of changes we need to make for our relationship to keep thriving." Relationship. She actually called our marriage a relationship, like we were hashing out a business merger. "I've figured out I bring a ton of value to this," she said, tapping her pen on the notebook like a CEO making a point. "My research says women like me aren't getting the credit we deserve for what we put in. It's time to fix that gap." Her confidence blew me away. She genuinely thought she was doing me a favor by letting me step up to her new expectations, like I should thank her for the chance to prove I'm worth keeping. "I've booked us for a serious talk this Saturday," she said. "I'll lay out my demands then, and you can think them over before we lock in the new deal." She stood, snapping her notebook shut with a smug little flourish. "Once you see the research I've done, I think you'll find my terms more than fair." Research on our marriage. As she walked off, I just sat there, trying to wrap my head around what just went down. My wife had just told me she was treating our marriage like a contract negotiation. She'd spent weeks figuring out how to squeeze more out of our relationship, and now she was ready to hand me her list of demands. The woman I married 8 years ago would have never looked at our life together this way. That woman got that marriage was about give and take, respect, and building something as a team. This woman saw it as a deal where she needed to come out on top. I had 4 days to brace myself for her big presentation, 4 days to figure out how I'd handle whatever demands she'd cooked up. She clearly thought I'd just roll over and agree to her terms, too afraid of losing her to push back. She was about to find out how wrong she was. Saturday couldn't roll around quick enough. I was dying to see what kind of deal she thought she could shove down my throat. More than that, I was itching to show her what happens when you try to turn a marriage into some corporate negotiation. If she wanted to play this like a boardroom game, I was ready to show her how real deal-making goes down. When Saturday hit, she'd turned our dining room into something straight out of a corporate seminar. She had printed spreadsheets, graphs, and even a little easel for her presentation. I walked in, and there she was, parked at the head of the table in a blazer, looking like she was about to pitch a startup to a room full of investors. "Thanks for showing up to this critical meeting," she started, motioning for me to take a seat across from her. "I've put together a thorough breakdown of our current setup and pinpointed the areas that need an overhaul right away." She slid a typed packet across the table labeled Marriage Partnership Redesign Plan. I could hardly believe my eyes. "Let's kick off with how we split chores," she said, jabbing at a pie chart. "Right now, we're dividing household tasks about 50-50, but my research says that's unfair considering all the emotional and planning work I put into keeping this house running." She turned to the next page. "Moving forward, you'll take on 70% of the household duties, cooking, cleaning, laundry, you name it. I'll shift my focus to big picture planning for our home. Big picture planning. She was trying to dress up doing less grunt work as some kind of high-level management role. Next up, money matters, she went on, completely missing the shock building on my face. I'm taking charge of our joint accounts and all financial decisions. You can keep your personal checking for small stuff, but anything major needs my sign-off. The nerve of it floored me. She wanted total control over the cash I bring in while doing less to keep our home together. Social commitments need a tweak too, she said, flipping through her stack of notes. You'll show up to every event with my friends and their spouses, no more skipping out or rolling in late. These connections matter for my growth and our social status. I've always been picky about social stuff, preferring low-key hangouts over big parties. Apparently, what I wanted didn't count anymore. Personal space and freedom, she declared, highlighting parts of her packet. I need 4 nights a week to myself, no interruptions. You'll need to find somewhere else to be during those times. Oh, and I want the master bedroom redone to match my style better. 4 nights a week. She was basically telling me to get lost from my own house more than half the time for her personal time. Lastly, intimacy rules, she said, her voice turning so cold and clinical it made my gut twist. Physical closeness will happen on my terms, when I'm ready, with no pressure or debates about how often. I'll let you know when I'm available. She shut her folder and stared at me, like she'd just laid out the deal of a lifetime. These are my must-have terms for keeping this partnership going, she stated. I've studied what modern, healthy marriages look like, and these are the gold standard for forward-thinking relationships. The gold standard for marriage. What if I don't sign off on these terms? I asked, keeping my tone even. Her smile slipped just a bit. Well, then I'd have to rethink whether this marriage is giving me what I need. I'm not sticking around in a setup that doesn't properly value what I bring to the table. And there it was, her ultimatum, wrapped in that polished corporate tone. I can tell you're mulling this over, she said, mistaking my quiet for deep thought. I know it's a lot to take in, but I'm sure you'll see the win-win here. I'm basically giving you the chance to stay married to a better, improved version of me. Improved version, like she was some app getting a fancy update. These terms let me show up as my best self in our marriage, she went on. When I'm supported and thriving, we all come out ahead. It's like putting money into our future together. She was totally sold on her own pitch. In her head, she was doing me a favor by letting me meet her new expectations. She'd convinced herself that agreeing to her demands would somehow make our marriage stronger. I need a bit to go over this, I said, getting up from the table. Take your time, she said with a big smile. Change can feel heavy, but I'm pumped about where we're going once we roll out these upgrades. As I left her makeshift conference room, I could hear her humming happily while she tidied up her charts and papers. She was downright proud of herself, certain her business-like approach had fixed everything wrong with our relationship. She had no clue what was coming. For the next few days, I did exactly what she'd told me to do. I went through her terms with a fine-tooth comb. I thought about what they meant for us. I even did my own digging, but not the kind she'd pictured. For 5 days, I let her think I was seriously weighing her proposal. She'd check in now and then, asking if I had questions or needed her to explain anything. With every day, she got more confident. I'm impressed with how level-headed you're being, she said Wednesday morning, giving my shoulder a pat like I was a team player who just accepted a pay cut. Most guys would get all worked up instead of calmly seeing the upside. What she didn't know was I was running my own analysis, just not on her terms. Those days, I was meeting with a divorce lawyer, getting a clear picture of our finances and how they'd split if things went south. I sorted our bank statements, made copies of key paperwork, and quietly shifted some cash into a personal account she couldn't touch. I also did my own version of market research. I checked out apartments in nicer parts of town. I figured out what living on my own would really cost. I crunched the numbers on her demands compared to just walking away. The results opened my eyes. By Friday, I had a full grasp of where we stood and a few paths forward. More than that, I had a plan. "I'm ready to talk about your proposal," I told her that evening, mimicking the formal tone she'd used the week before. Her face practically glowed with smug satisfaction. "That's great. I knew you'd come around once you thought it through logically. Let's set up a real meeting for Sunday," I said. "I want to give your plan the detailed response it calls for." She was over the moon. "I'll pull together some extra notes to clear up any questions you might have." Sunday morning, I turned our living room into my own presentation space. I had my own stack of documents, my laptop, and even borrowed her easel. When she walked in and saw my setup, she clapped her hands like a kid at a birthday party. "Look at you, getting all professional," she gushed. "I love that we're tackling this like grown-ups." "Take a seat, please," I said, pointing to the chair across from me. "I've gone through your proposal, done my homework, and put together a detailed response." She plopped down, all eager, her notebook ready to jot down any tweaks I might suggest to her flawless plan. "First off, I appreciate the effort you put into your presentation," I started. "It really cleared up a lot about where we're at and what's going on between us." She gave a nod, looking pleased that I was playing nice. "After digging into your terms and doing some research of my own, I've spotted a few red flags," I went on, flipping open my laptop to show a spreadsheet I'd worked up. "Red flags? Like what?" she asked, leaning in, curious instead of concerned. "Let's start with a simple pros and cons breakdown," I said, turning the screen her way. "Your plan basically cuts back on what you put into our home while piling way more onto me. In business terms, that's a deal that's losing value fast." Her smile flickered, but she bounced back quick. "I think you're missing the bigger picture of what my new role brings to the table." "Nah, I'm pretty sure I've got the picture clear," I shot back. "Which leads me to my counteroffer." I slid a folder across the coffee table between us. "After weighing your terms against what's out there and the options I've got, I'm calling your proposal a bad deal." "Bad deal? What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, her confident tone starting to wobble. "I'm saying the payoff doesn't match the price tag," I explained, throwing her corporate lingo right back at her. "Your demands jack up my workload while shrinking what I get out of this partnership." She stared, clearly not ready for this kind of pushback. "We can tweak some of the specifics if you've got issues." "That's mighty kind," I said. "But the whole setup's broken at its core. I'm going in a completely different direction." "What direction?" she asked, and for the first time since this whole negotiation nonsense started, I heard a hint of doubt in her voice. I opened my folder and pulled out the top document. "I'm going with what I'm calling the exit strategy." Her face went pale as I set the divorce papers down on the coffee table. "What are these?" she whispered, eyeing the papers like they might jump at her. "This is my counteroffer," I said, keeping my voice steady. "After a full review of our current setup, I've decided that walking away makes the most sense, business-wise." "You're not serious," she stammered, but I could see panic sneaking into her eyes as she realized I wasn't messing around. "Let me break down my reasoning," I went on, pulling out a detailed spreadsheet. "You wanted to treat this like a corporate deal, so let's look at the numbers." I turned my laptop toward her, showing a breakdown I'd spent days putting together. "Here's the current performance report," I started. "Household contribution, down to 30% and dropping. Relationship satisfaction, trending negative. Maintenance costs, skyrocketing. Return on investment, pretty much zilch." She tried to cut in, but I raised a hand. "The financials show your terms would bump my costs up by about 60% while tanking the quality of what I get by the same amount. No smart business would sign off on that." "This isn't a business," she snapped, her boardroom cool finally breaking. "You're the one who turned this into a business," I said, keeping my tone even. "You came at me with terms, pushed for negotiations, and acted like our marriage was some deal you could fine-tune. I'm just playing by the rules you set. I reached into my folder and pulled out another paper. Here's my market analysis, I said. I looked into other options besides sticking with our current setup. Going solo comes with lower costs, better satisfaction, and way less stress. Her jaw dropped, then shut, no words coming out. She was finally getting that her big negotiation plan had blown up in her face. My risk breakdown shows that signing onto your terms would just lead to more demands, worse results, and a relationship that'd crash anyway, I went on. Cutting ties now saves what's left of my resources. You're talking about our marriage like it's a company going under, she said, her voice cracking. Your framing, not mine, I pointed out. You set up this whole corporate showdown, laid out your demands, and gave me an ultimatum, take your deal or lose you. I picked door number 3, find something better. I leaned back, watching her grapple with the mess she'd made. We can still fix this, she begged, dropping her boardroom act completely. I'll dial back my demands. Sorry, but the deal-making phase is over, I said, throwing her business speak right back. Your original pitch showed we're not on the same page about what this marriage is. Keeping this going would be like dumping cash into a sinking ship. She stared at the divorce papers, finally seeing her power move had tanked. What about everything we've built, she asked, sounding desperate. That's all laid out in Section 4 of the separation agreement, I said, tapping the stack of documents. How we split assets, the timeline for wrapping things up, and cutting all shared ties. Clean and professional, just like you wanted. I don't get how we ended up here, she said, looking genuinely lost. I thought you'd fight to keep me. That was your big mistake, I told her. You thought you were the only game in town and didn't realize I had other options. Classic negotiation fumble. The irony was almost too good. She'd spent weeks scheming to get more out of our marriage, but never once considered I might decide she wasn't worth her asking price. What if I scrap all my demands? She asked, panic in her voice. We can go back to how it was. No chance, I said, firm. You've already shown me how you really see this relationship. To you, I'm just a tool to maximize, not a partner to respect. You can't walk that back. She tried one last shot. But I love you. Your proposal told a different story, I said. Love doesn't come with a contract. It doesn't need renegotiating. It doesn't treat your spouse like some employee who's got to prove their value. I stood, gathering my papers, mirroring the way she'd walked out a week earlier. This ends when you sign those papers, I said. I think you'll find the settlement fair, given your recent track record. As I headed for the door, I heard her sobbing behind me, but I didn't turn around. She'd wanted to play high-stakes business games with our marriage. She just found out I was better at the game. The next 3 days were like watching someone realize they'd gambled away the best thing they'd ever had. She started off mad, calling me stubborn and saying I was blowing her fair requests out of proportion. When that got her nowhere, she switched to pleading, saying she'd tweak her terms or ditch them altogether. I was just trying to test how we handle tough talks, she said Tuesday morning, catching me off guard in the kitchen. I wanted to see if we could sort out hard stuff as a team. Testing, I echoed, filling my coffee mug without glancing her way. That's a funny way to spin handing me an ultimatum backed by pie charts and a formal packet. I might have come off too intense, she conceded. But we can work this out. Your proposal was just the tip of the iceberg, I said, finally looking her in the eye. The real issue is you thought you could bully me into swallowing whatever terms you laid out. That shows me exactly how you view me. That evening, she switched tactics, hitting me with what she probably thought was a sweet move when I got home from work. I cooked your favorite meal, she said, pointing to the dining room where she'd lit candles and popped open a bottle of wine. Let's sit down and clear up this mix-up. There's no mix-up, I said, brushing past her fancy setup. You made your stance crystal clear, and I gave you mine. There's nothing left to talk about. You're being pig-headed, she said, trailing me up the stairs. Relationships take give and take. You're not wrong, I nodded. They do need give and take. But your proposal? It was all take, no give, with a threat tacked on. By Wednesday, she was in full panic mode. She showed up at my office during lunch, eyes red from crying, pleading with me to rethink things. I've been talking to my sister, she said, sitting across from my desk like someone begging for a loan extension. She made me see I went about this all wrong. Your sister had to point out that threatening to ditch our marriage unless I agreed to your demands might not end well. I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I wasn't threatening to leave, she argued. I was trying to make our relationship better. By telling me to accept your terms or lose you, I said, spelling it out. That's the textbook definition of a threat. She reached for my hands across the desk, but I leaned back. Please, she begged. I know I screwed up. But we can fix this. Marriage is about forgiving and giving second chances. Marriage is about respecting each other, I corrected. You proved you don't see me as an equal partner to talk things out with. You treated me like some underling who's gotta follow orders. I was just mixed up, she insisted. Those online forums stuffed my head with dumb ideas. I get that now. Those forums didn't make you print out a list of demands and set up a negotiation meeting, I shot back. They didn't force you to treat our marriage like a corporate takeover. That was all you. By Thursday, she pulled out her last-ditch effort, getting her mom to call me, hoping family pressure would sway me. She's a wreck, her mom said over the phone. She knows she messed up, but isn't divorce a little drastic? Did she tell you what her mess-up was? I asked. She said you guys argued about who does what around the house, her mom answered. I almost laughed at how she'd rewritten history. Turning her full-blown corporate ultimatum into a spat about chores was some next-level spin. She handed me a stack of non-negotiable demands and said take it or she's gone, I explained. I went with option 3, find someone who doesn't treat marriage like a contract negotiation. But she's ready to drop all that now, her mom pushed. Can't you just let this go? I could let it go, I told her mom, but I'm not going to. She showed her true colors when she thought she had the upper hand. I don't want to be married to someone who treats me like a tool to manage instead of a partner to respect. Friday evening, she made one final stab at fixing things, catching me as I got home from another meeting with my lawyer. We don't have to file those papers, she said softly. We could act like none of this ever happened. But it did happen, I shot back. You spent weeks scheming to squeeze more out of our marriage. You studied negotiation tricks, put together charts, the whole deal. This wasn't some split-second bad call. I was an idiot, she admitted. I got sucked into all that online garbage about women needing to demand better. I lost sight of how good we already had it. No, I said, not letting her off the hook. What we had was solid. What you wanted was me signing up for a raw deal while thanking you for the chance. So that's it, she asked, tears rolling down her cheeks. 8 years of marriage gone because I pushed too hard. 8 years gone because you tried to strong-arm me with demands instead of talking to me like your husband, I corrected. The irony hit me months later when I bumped into her at the grocery store, about 6 months down the road. She looked worn out, like life had taught her a tough lesson. How's it going? She asked, her voice awkward, fishing for any hint I might regret walking away. Doing better than I figured, I said, keeping it real. You? She asked, forcing a smile that didn't touch her eyes. I'm good, really good. Just focusing on myself, you know, personal growth stuff. Same old buzzwords that started this whole disaster. Some folks never change. Glad to hear it, I said, and I meant it. Everyone deserves to be happy. You seeing anyone? She asked, trying to play it cool but not quite pulling it off. Yeah, I am, I answered. I've got someone new. The hurt flashed across her face, raw and real. Reality stings harder than any theory. Is it serious? She pushed, clearly hoping I'd say no. Pretty serious, I said. She's amazing. We're even talking about moving in together. I didn't tell her how different this new relationship felt. My girlfriend gets that a partnership means teamwork, not one person calling the shots. When we hit a rough patch, she brings up ideas to talk through, not a list of demands. That's quick, my ex said, a bitter note slipping into her voice. When you know what you're after, you don't drag your feet, I replied. She shifted, looking uneasy, clearly scrambling for what to say next. I learned a lot from what went down with us, she said after a pause. I see now how bad I handled things. Good to know you got something out of it, I said. That's what counts. Do you ever wonder how things might have turned out if I'd approached it differently? She asked. It was a fair question, and I gave her the straight answer. Honestly, I think you showed me who you really are when you thought you had me backed into a corner. Even if I'd gone along with your terms, you'd have just come back with more later. That's how folks like that roll. What do you mean, people like that? She asked, her voice sharp with defensiveness. Folks who treat relationships like a game where one side's gotta come out on top and the other's gotta lose, I explained. You weren't trying to make our marriage better. You were looking to boost your own standing at my expense. She stood there, quiet, probably realizing I'd hit the nail on the head. I hope you find what you're after, I said, meaning it. I really do. As I turned to go, she called out one last time. I did love you, you know, she said. I believe you, I replied, pausing. But I think you loved the idea of calling the shots more than you loved me. 3 months after that run-in, I got down on one knee for my girlfriend. She said yes right away, her eyes shining with happy tears. No contracts, no negotiations, just us. My ex had bet everything on thinking she had me backed into a corner. Turns out, I was the one better off. The difference was night and day. My ex tried to use our relationship to gain control over me, while my girlfriend offers ideas to build something together. My ex demanded I prove my worth, my girlfriend works to show she's all in for us. My ex threw ultimatums, my girlfriend brings compromises. Once you've been with someone who loves you and someone who just wants to use you, the difference is impossible to miss. My ex learned the hard way that treating marriage like a business deal can land you with divorce papers. She thought she held all the cards when she tried to renegotiate our relationship. She found out the real power in any deal belongs to the one ready to walk away. Last I heard, she was still single, still caught up in those online empowerment groups, still searching for someone to sign her terms. Some folks spend their whole lives trying to negotiate their way to happiness instead of building it with someone. I chose to build, not bargain. Best call I ever made. You can't negotiate respect. It's either given and returned, or you find someone who gets that. That's the end of my story. Looking back, it's a hell of a tale, one worth sharing with anyone who'll listen. I've got a couple other stories that come to mind, ones that taught me just as much. I'll save those for another day. Until then, I'm just glad to be where I am now.